Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is now our final segment here on our Good Friday program. Naturally, Festival of Easter brings up the question of world peace. How do you get peace in the world? Well, I guess, first of all, by facing the difficulties that we have. This is now the collapse of the Anglo-American Empire, especially in the form that we've had it since about 1989 to 1991, since the collapse of the communist regime in East Germany and then the breakup of the Soviet Union, the USSR itself. And this, unfortunately, such moments of transition are generally punctuated by major wars. You could say there's been a war in the first 10, 15, 20 years of each century, going back to the 1500s, going back to the War of the League of Cambrai. Actually, you can take it back to the 100 Years' War, although that one had started earlier. Let us just compare this period of total U.S.-British world domination to previous episodes of the same sort. And you'll begin to see what this tends to show us. Let's look, for example, at the Spanish Empire. I would argue that the Spanish world empire reached its peak between about 1559 and, let's say, 1598 or 1600, something like that. It's about a 40-year period of world domination. The start of this, of course, is the Peace of Cateau-Cambrésis, Cateau, Cambresis, 1559. This is essentially the defeat of France in the Italian wars that had been going on for more than 60 years at that point, with the Spanish coming out on top. That gives them domination there. The victory of Philip II in the War of the Schmalkaldic League in Germany gives the Spanish victory there. So the Spanish defeat the French and their allies in Germany, and in the Holy Roman Empire, that is, and in Italy. That means the Spanish dominate Europe. Then in 1571, the Spanish-led coalition defeats the Turkish fleet in the Battle of Lepanto, and you soon have France falling into wars of religion from 1562 to 1598. Right? You got this Protestant insurgency run by Calvin from Geneva, started by him anyway, going on. So that's the French are basically knocked out. You even have a period when the Spanish army invades France, 1590 or so. There's a siege of Paris even. So that's Spanish world domination, except that it begins to fall apart towards the end of the century. You have the defeat of the Invincible Armada by the English in 1588, and very important, the rebellion of the Netherlands starting in the 1560s. So we can say that the world supremacy of the Spanish begins to get eroded in the 1580s, and by the end of the 1590s, it's basically gone. And you have the new King of France, Henry IV, backed up by Sully, using dirigist economic methods of the type that we recommend here, leading the comeback of France. Then we have the Treaty of Vervins towards, 1598, 1599. The Spanish pledged that they're going to stay out of French internal affairs. And at that point, really by about 1600, the Spanish world supremacy is pretty much undermined, except that it's going to take the 30 Years' War, this amazing three-decade bloodletting, one-third to one-half of the population of Central Europe exterminated, to essentially make the decline of Spain a permanent thing, and indeed the hegemony of France. So it takes quite a while. It takes really about a century to work through this the fall of the Spanish Empire. Now let's look at France. The French domination of Europe and the world starts at about 1659, and it's what I've just said. 1659, the French and the Spanish had kept fighting after the end of the general 30 Years' War, right? Peace of Westphalia was 1648. That's the end of the 30 Years' War in most places. But France and Spain keep their war going for another decade. 1659, the Peace of the Pyrenees. This is that the French have defeated the Spanish finally. So from from the Cateau-Cambrésis 1559 to the Peace of the Pyrenees 1659. It takes a whole century to work through Spanish world domination and establish the French instead. So then we have, this is now under Louis XIV of France. What you're going to see then is a series of wars by Louis XIV with William of Orange, King of England, and also running the Dutch operation. The so-called Grand Alliance, promoted by William of Orange, is then going to knock off the French, so that the French domination probably lasts from 1659 until about 1710, 1715, and especially it is ended by the War of the Spanish Succession, starting in 1701 and then going until 1715 or so, with the Treaty of Utrecht. And with the Treaty of Utrecht, the French domination is essentially over. So this is a process of about 50 or 55 years that the French have world domination. After that, though, you could say the British tend to dominate the oceans, but in continental Europe, you have a series of wars, right? You have the War of the Spanish Succession, you have the War of the Austrian Succession around the middle of the century, the 7 Years' War a little bit after the middle of the century, and the Napoleonic Wars. So you've got a period of a good century after the British get the upper hand, before the British are able to establish a really solid position of world domination. So the French episode is over after 50 years, and then you have a very unsettled period. Now, the British domination. The British are in pretty much world naval domination after Utrecht, say about 1714, 1715. But in continental Europe, there's a kind of a balance that goes on for quite a while. The French and the Bavarians and some others, the French, the Spanish, and the Bavarians against the British and the Austrians with various changes then. It really does take all those wars, from the Spanish Succession to Napoleon, to establish British world domination. The British world domination really reaches its peak between 1848 and 1871. And as we've pointed out, the British world domination in 1848 has to do with these provoked revolutions, the Mazzini networks, the Marx, Engels, Young Germany coming into that, the Bakunin anarchists overthrowing Metternich of Austria, overthrowing Louis-Philippe of Paris, both of these characters fleeing to London, destabilizations of most countries, although not of Russia. So 1648, the British pretty much knock off and weaken all the existing governments of continental Europe, although Russia is able to hang tough. And then they go after Russia with the Crimean War in 1853. They go after India with the Sepoy Rebellion provoked. Then they go after Mexico with Louis Napoleon. Remember that Louis Napoleon, installed in France after 1648, is a British puppet, and he attacks all sorts of places, attacks Russia, attacks Mexico, attacks Indochina, does some stuff in Italy, which has a better outcome for world history. But the idea is the British then dominate Europe. They really dominate the world except for Russia. And then, as you go on, Lincoln wins the Civil War in the United States, big defeat for the British, and then Bismarck unites Germany, 1870, 1871. That means then that the British domination has run up against these big barriers, against Russia, Prussia, and the United States. All of them, especially Russia and the United States, closely allied, and friendship at least between Prussia and the others. So that one lasted maybe 25 years, although it's going to take then World War I to really put an end to British. It actually takes two world wars to end British world domination. So we're now coming to the end of the U.S.-British world domination, which started in 1989, 1990, 1991. So we have to be very much aware of the danger of general war, because in the three examples that I've given you, general war has been the result. See you next week on World Crisis Radio.